Anyone who tells you to ignore formatting and to not worry about grammar is an idiot of the first order. You can quote me on that, because they don't understand that both of those things are tools and help you tell a better story. If you're gonna take the time to tell a story, then tell a story that matters. It's great that you're on the screenwriter journey and that you want to get better as a screenwriter. But at the same time, you aren't wanting to broadcast to others that you're a noob, a new writer. If people think you're too new, too green, they'll just dismiss you out of hand, or at least that's what you think, and you don't want that. And the flags we're talking about today all scream new writer.
Are you telling me I don't know how to drive my own car?
The fix for them is simple. You either have to move past or through these flags, or you simply gotta avoid doing them. And that'll make sense here in a second. But first, I need your help. I want to hear from you about where you are at in your screenwriting journey. What are some things that you need help with? And even what are some screenwriting goals that you have for yourself this year? And I literally want to have a conversation with you over Zoom about that. So I've set aside some time I'm calling 30 minutes with Jake. There's a link below where you can schedule a 30-minute Zoom call with me, and I'm primarily going to be listening to you. And the reason is I want to make sure that I'm helping you, that I'm giving you the content on this channel that you need, and so I can figure out other ways to better help each of you become the screenwriter that you're wanting to be. So click the link, choose a time that works for your schedule, and I'll ask you some questions, and if time allows, you can ask me whatever you want, but keep in mind I'm going to hold the calls to 30 minutes to honor your time and the time of others who also schedule time to talk. I'm hoping I can talk with at least 50 of you. So if you have 30 minutes and you wouldn't mind chatting with me about your screenwriting experiences, I would love to hear from you. So please click that link below and schedule a time to talk. And now onto our 5 flags that scream you're a noob screenwriter, but I want to be clear. The first 2 I'm going to mention are not categorically bad. I mean, in actuality, they are stages of growth that new writers must go through as they move into intermediate writers. You don't simply start out as an intermediate or advanced screenwriter, much to, I know, many of your disappointment.
The customer's always right. You ever hear that? Yeah. Such a nonsense. Now remember, advance the time. It's on switch 20 first. Get the raise up. Good lad. Raise up.
So if you find yourself doing the first 2 that I'm going to mention, it should just be more of a gut check that you aren't as far along in the screenwriting journey as you might have originally thought. And that's perfectly fine. This is a journey. And some new writers, and even writers who've been doing this for a while, they get aggravated when they aren't progressing as fast as they think they should. But you shouldn't get aggravated, because the reality is once you realize that you aren't progressing like you want, well, now you have the ability to do something about it. But writers who never try to get any better, or who only get better at a snail's pace, are writers who think that they have it figured out because they've read a couple of books, they've lurked on some online discussion groups, and they think their passion project is a masterpiece. Newsflash, it isn't. Not yet. There are some things you have to learn if you want to be a screenwriter, and you need practice, not just in some of the fundamentals, but in writing full-length scripts. And with that experience and the practice that you engage in, you will gain some skills. And only when your knowledge and skills and experiences are all kind of working together, only then can you get better. The thing is, everyone learns at different paces. I mean, some of us have more time than others. Some of us are more naturally skilled than others. And not everyone has to learn the same way, but everyone does have to learn the core fundamentals. And skipping the fundamentals causes you to do some of these big 5 noob things that you shouldn't be doing.
In the last 3 years, you and your marketing team have presided over the worst sales slump in US history. Why exactly should Mr. Ford listen to you?
Because we've been thinking wrong.
And realize in naming these 5 things, I may be stepping on your toes a bit, but know that I'm doing it because I love you and I care and I want you to succeed. So if your toes hurt a little after watching this video, I'm sorry, because I want you to get better. Not sorry. So flag number 1, you begin any question you have about screenwriting with, can I? Or it's not nearly as bad, cousin, how can I? All screenwriters go through the can I phase of writing. And when you start out, you're going to hear about certain rules of writing, and they mostly have to do with format and to an extent, etiquette.
Nothing in there about my trunk and your lovely little portmanteau.
You're holding the 62 edition of the SCCA.
And new writers get really concerned about not breaking the rules. Inevitably, though, you engage with a story. So you're figuring this out and you sit down, you start trying to write a story, and a story is kind of like a living, breathing organism. And it doesn't always behave like we want it to. So we need to do something different in our story. We're trying to tell it, we're working through it. We need to do something different, something outside of the rules or things that are allowed, or whatever we imagine is allowed, to tell the story. But we're not sure if we can do it or not. And so we ask questions like, can I format the scene just a little differently? Can I ignore standard slug lines? Can I introduce this character a little sooner without telling their name yet? Can I? And the list goes on and on and on. And this makes perfect sense, and I 100% get why new writers ask questions like this. Maybe you've heard some horror story about some producer kicking a script because it was misformatted, and you don't want that for your story. But because you're doing it a little differently, you ask, can I... ... Maybe you've been told or read in some book somewhere that screenwriting only deals with the audio and visual senses, which is true, but you know it would really help the description of the room that you're trying to describe if you could just simply describe it as everything is smoother than a well-aged whiskey. But can you do that? I mean, can you describe touch and taste in a screenplay that's audio and visual? Or maybe you're just wanting to learn how to do things correctly, whatever that means to you, because you don't want to learn the wrong way. So you want to know, can I do something? But the issue with screenwriting is never about can I or can you. It's always about should you. You see, the reason can I is a noob question is because experienced writers know that you don't need permission to break the rules. But a better way to think about them would be guidelines or a code. And most of those guidelines or codes have to do with how you tell the story. And the thing is, you can tell a story any way you want. But the question you need to be asking is whether or not the way you're wanting to tell the story is the best way to tell the story. So it's never an issue of can you, but it's always a question of should you.
Are you nuts?
The cousin of the can I question is the how can I question. And it's not nearly as bad. All it does is just expose that you don't yet have enough experience to solve the problem, or you don't yet have enough knowledge and skill to discover a solution on your own. And that's perfectly fine and normal. In fact, asking the question is part of the learning process. So if you find yourself asking the how can I question, don't apologize for it. You keep asking it, because in the asking and in getting answers, you're going to gain knowledge and experience, and you'll find in time you won't be asking the question as much anymore, because you're going to start figuring out how to solve your own problems. But that only comes with experience. The other thing about these two questions and why the can I question is actually a little worse is because of the attitude associated with them. The can I question is phrased as if you are on the outside looking in, that you are asking insiders if you're able to do X or Y, and somehow trying to gain their approval or blessing to be welcomed into the inner sanctum of writers, where maybe they'll show you the secret handshake. There isn't one, by the way. Whereas the how can I question is a question being asked to peers. So in the very act of the can I question, you are admitting that you aren't yet a screenwriter. You don't yet have the skills, the knowledge, the experience, or confidence to admit that you're a screenwriter, maybe not even to yourself. But in asking the how can I question, you are looping yourself in with the rest of us crazies who love telling stories for the screen. And again, these are two phases that every writer goes through. I mean, some of us are brand new and just trying it out, seeing if we like it. So of course we're gonna ask if we can do things or not. Of course we're going to do that. That's totally normal. And once you decide you're going to do it, once you decide like, hey, I'm in, even if you're still doing it as a hobby, maybe more seriously though, then you start asking the how can I question, testing out the whole peer thing, because we are in it together. And I know it seems like screenwriters are competing against one another, but that's not really the case, except in a screenwriting contest. In the real world, we don't compete with one another. We want each other to succeed. And yet, if you're asking either of these questions, can I or how can I, you are a noob screenwriter. But for this one, that's okay. It's normal. Just start shifting your thinking and you're going to move through this one. The second flag is another one that isn't bad unless you've just outright skipped it. And then it's bad. And it's this. You haven't spent any focused time learning the tools of story and the tools of storytelling. I get it. You have an idea for a movie, you read a screenplay book or two, you learn about saving the cat or journeying like a hero, and you think you've got this all figured out, so you jump in and start trying to write a story. I mean, how hard can it be? A screenplay is only 110 pages or so, and there's a lot of white space on the page. Only for you to get into it and realize that your 110-page story, or what you thought was that, is now 157 pages. You aren't even close to halfway, and someone else starts looking at your story and they tell you that you actually only have 40 pages of story so far and 110 pages of fluff, and you should just throw it away and start over. All of that could have been alleviated and avoided if you would have taken the time to learn the craft the right way, to learn the right things and the right elements. Again, this one boils down to attitude. So let me give you an example. Most of you watching can probably drive a car. You've gotten in the driver's seat of a car, you've driven down the road. Some of you have probably been driving a long time.
It's a bit of racing fun, no?
No, it's not the same at all.
Well, I think it's thrilling!
All right.
But do you think that you could, tomorrow, take the keys for a race car and be a driver in a professional car race? There's no way. And even if you could, even if by some chance you've got the skill to do it, no one would want to race with you if they found out that you were brand new. Not because you couldn't drive. Maybe you could.
Yes! More of that, please. More of that, my girl.
But do you even know what the engine is supposed to sound like when you're going 150 miles an hour?
Oh! Giddy up! Giddy up!
Do you know if it's safe to downshift or not around a corner going 120?
This car wants to go faster. I feel it.
You don't know because you haven't taken the time to learn the craft. You don't know, more than likely, what all the parts of your car even do. You just know that you turn the key or push a button and it turns on. You aren't experienced in the craft yet. But that's what a lot of people think about screenwriting. They think, hey, I know how to write, so I'll just write a story in screenplay format, sell it, it'll be grand. But you don't even know how stories work. You might know why you like or dislike certain stories, but you can't explain why one story is working and another one isn't. Or maybe it's not even the story problem at all. Maybe it's the storytelling, the way you're choosing to tell the story. Because I can tell you from a story point of view, both Spider-Man No Way Home and The Matrix Resurrection have solid and sound stories. But the storytelling for one is much better and as a result, it's breaking all kinds of box office records, while the other one is being slammed across social media. To be a screenwriter, actually even to be an intermediate screenwriter, you at least have to know the difference between story and storytelling and what tools you have at your disposal to shape each of them. That doesn't mean you're going to be an expert at using them. That doesn't mean that every story is going to work exactly like you want. Sometimes it doesn't. That's just the way it goes. But you have to understand what the tools are that you have at your disposal, what the story tools are, what the storytelling tools are. But it's okay if you don't know the tools yet. You're starting out. You're new. It's okay if you don't know the difference, but you do have to spend some focused time learning them. And you can do it on your own, which is going to take you a while, but you can also do other things to learn. And this is one reason why I created the Screenwriting Fast Track course, because it focuses on the story and storytelling things that you need to know. So if that's of interest to you, check out the Screenwriting Fast Track link below. Either way, you still have to learn them. And if you're just trying to write screenplays without learning the basics and the fundamentals, you are demonstrating in your writing that you are a noob. And you won't even know it because everyone else, they know whether or not you can downshift in a corner going 120. And everyone else knows exactly what the car is supposed to sound like when you're driving at 150 miles an hour. So you got to learn those things too. And if you don't learn, you're just broadcasting that you're a noob. These next three flags, unlike the first two, are categorically bad and scream noob to everyone. The first two, okay, those are normal parts of growing as a screenwriter, but these three, they should be avoided if you're doing any of them. And especially if you're doing any of them right now, you just need to stop. Flag number 3, you blatantly ignore or reject formatting conventions and proper grammar. Formatting and grammar are storytelling tools, which you would learn if you were doing some focused learning to get better at the craft. Flag number 2. Anyone who tells you to ignore formatting and to not worry about grammar is an idiot of the first order. You can quote me on that, because they don't understand that both of those things are tools and help you tell a better story. As a guideline, and as I noted earlier, you should be following the formatting conventions related to screenwriting. Screenplays are formatted the way they are for very specific reasons, and you need to learn what they are. And like we mentioned earlier, of course you can deviate from the conventions, because it's not a matter of can you deviate, it's a matter of should you deviate. And if you're deviating and asking the question of, does this deviation help me tell my story better, then you are doing it the proper way. And in that case, it's okay. But if you're deviating and it's just because you flat out don't know what the normal convention is, or because you just flat out don't care, well, this is a whole other level of dumb. If you're doing these kinds of things, you are actually making it harder on yourself to progress as a screenwriter, because you are acting as if what applies to everyone else in the world doesn't apply to you. That you are somehow better than everyone else, that you are entitled, and frankly, you aren't.
You want me to apologize? You want me to beg?
I don't know. Let's try it out. Let's see how that feels.
There are some who get away with acting entitled in Hollywood, but none of them are writers. Entitled writers are fired as quickly as possible. So stop thinking you are better or more important than someone else. Learn the conventions of formatting, and if you're going to deviate from them, you better be doing it for a story reason, and you better know exactly why you're doing it. One other thing about formatting: screenwriting software helps you format according to typical conventions. I mean, if you want to be a screenwriter and you aren't using screenwriting software and you don't want to, you should probably just quit now, honestly. Because there's numerous free versions of software that you can get that are gonna help you out. There is no excuse for you to not be using screenwriting software. So saddle up, stop writing screenplays where the dialogue is just centered on the page and yet extends to the margins on both sides because it looks like a 7th grader decided to start writing a screenplay.
Hit it. Attaboy.
But if you want to tell others that you're a noob screenwriter, hey, don't use screenwriting software. Format it however you want. It's going to broadcast you're a noob, not a problem. And then we get to grammar. This doesn't mean you can't write in sentence fragments or in long run-on sentences within dialogue, because people do literally talk like that.
Do you want to speak to my mum?
Well, I did. I came to say hello, check in on her, and then I started thinking sometimes words just are not useful.
What it does mean is you need to know the difference between your and your, between its and its, between two and two. And you need to use commas appropriately and make sure you're including terminal punctuation, periods, question marks, exclamation points the right way. Like format, grammar is a storytelling tool, and you can shape how a reader feels while reading your screenplay based on the grammar you're using. So if you don't know grammar, you need to learn it. There are only a few things that light my fires faster than someone saying, I want to be a screenwriter, but I don't know grammar. Is that okay? And one of them is a response from another wannabe or seasoned writer saying, yeah, no one cares about grammar. They 100% care about grammar. It's just that when your writing is focused and on point, so your story, you know exactly what it is, you're telling it in a very specific way, you tend to have less grammatical errors anyway. So if your story is clicking on all cylinders, chances are you will only have a few grammar issues anyway that you're going to have to address. If you're finding lots of grammar issues, then I can guarantee you that you have bigger problems than just grammar, because your scenes, your dialogue, and more than likely your story is broken. Bad grammar is just an indication of a broken story, mostly. So don't be a noob on this one. Follow formatting conventions, learn grammar, and put this one to bed. The next flag on my list is my favorite, being sarcastic, noob screenwriting mistake. Flag number 4, your script begins with a character waking up, or worse, a sequence that takes place in a dream, and then your character waking up. This trope, cliche, thorn in my side, has been around a long time. And yes, we want to show a character's normal, everyday life and establishing the status quo life of a character is important. You're going to learn that in the story tools if you don't know that already. But this has been done so many times and in so many ways, and it is overused, boring, and lazy with a capital. Don't do it. I know you read somewhere that you should know how your protagonist spends their day. I know part of that exercise always results in you imagining their morning routine and waking up.
Let's go.
It's 8:30 a.m., baby. Time to roll.
But for some reason, writers think that that's what we need to see to meet the character. We're going to get more in tune with the character if we see how they make coffee each day. Does how they make coffee move the story forward at all? Now, yes, okay, admittedly, there are some things you can establish in a morning routine. Is the character messy or clean? Are they random or methodical? Do they take pride in their appearance or just throw something dirty on from the laundry? Do they have any scars that we need to know about, or tattoos or ingrown toenails? Who cares? Every single character trait you think you need a morning routine to show can be demonstrated in another way and in another scene. So if you're doing this, it's just plain lazy.
She's running a little hot, watch it! You show me if you like it! Get him! You okay? Feel the tank! Shelby, you just... Am I on fire? No, you're not on fire!
But here's why it's really bad. There's no conflict in a morning routine. It's life as normal. Normal life, especially if a character is by themselves, which most protagonists are, doesn't have conflict in a morning routine, with very few exceptions. And no conflict makes it even more boring. Screen stories are full of conflict, or they should be, so please, for the love of all that is good and great about movies, stop making this mistake that screams you're a noob and don't have characters waking up or dreaming to start your story. And if you have a story like that right now, I'm guessing some of you watching might, here's how you fix it. Delete everything about their morning routine from their script. Find the first scene where there is actual conflict and start your story there. Your story will be immediately better. You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Flag number 5 is the biggest noob mistake of them all, and it can hurt you for a long time if you do it. Trying to show your unprofessional work too soon and in an unprofessional way. Earlier when I mentioned that there are some screenwriting rules, and those rules, quote unquote, typically apply to two categories of things, format and etiquette. This is the etiquette one. And so many people who want to be a screenwriter decide they're going to write a script and sell it. So they write it, their very first script. They give it to a couple of friends, they get some feedback from them, which may or may not be good. I mean, the new writer doesn't really know the difference between a good note and a bad note anyway. So some changes are made, and then this noob screenwriter decides they're going to send it out. Maybe they know some people. Maybe they get on IMDb Pro and get some addresses and names, and let's just say lightning strikes and the idea has some merit and the query letter is at least moderately decent and the script is requested. Once it's requested though, is when things start to fall apart. Every studio, talent agency, manager, and production company will more than likely send a release for you to sign and submit with your script. But some new writers, afraid someone's going to steal their idea, try to get those entities to also sign a release. The company will politely decline and probably resend their request to read your script. You're already proving difficult to work with because you don't know the proper etiquette and rules. Screenwriting is a profession done by professionals in a professional manner. You have to learn how to act and behave like a professional, and your scripts have to be at a professional caliber. And if they aren't, you're only making it harder on yourself.
Now, this is not a machine just anybody can get in and easily control.
Absolutely not. I had no idea.
But for the sake of argument, let's say that they read your script because you signed their release and decide that trying to get them to sign the release that you found online is stupid, and it is. So you send your script in. And one of three things can happen at this point. One, they say, thanks but no thanks, and that's it. But a new writer starts thinking, well, they just don't get my genius and they're a bunch of idiots. And I've seen some new writers who even take to social media to blast a film entity just because they just didn't get me. Number two, they like your writing, but they don't love this script. but they want to set up a general meeting. Do you know how to behave in that meeting? Do you know what the meeting will be about? How do you prepare? And more than likely you don't. That's okay. You're new. And you could find out if you're smart enough to ask other writers for advice. But most new writers aren't. They think they've struck gold. They think they read my script and want to talk to me, I'm about to cash a big check with a bunch of zeros. Nope.
Give me one reason why I don't fire everyone associated with this abomination, starting with you.
They want to know if you're a new writer, and they're deciding if they might want to work with you in the future.
I was thinking about that very question as I sat out there in your lovely waiting room.
The third thing that can happen, which is super rare among new writers, and so rare that you've probably heard about it every single time it's ever happened. A new writer writes their first screenplay, which is so awesome that someone wants to buy it. Now, the odds of this happening are so slim, but they are better odds than buying a lottery ticket for the sheer fact that more people buy lottery tickets than write screenplays. Part of learning to be a screenwriter isn't just the writing of a screenplay. It's about knowing how to be a team player, about knowing how to be a collaborator. Because unlike writing a novel or short story, which are end results, the thing you write is the thing that gets published, okay? In those cases, a screenplay is an organic living thing, and anytime a new collaborator is brought in, the story changes. Your screenplay is the starting line, not the finish line. It defines the playing area, but everything that happens on the field during the game, it doesn't do that. And if you want to play in the game, if you want to play in the screenwriting game, you have to learn how the etiquette works. You have to learn how to treat people and how to interpret what they say and what they mean, how to interact with them on a professional level. And most new writers don't know how to be professionals. They may have some skills, but they don't know how to navigate the system around them. And you have to learn. But if you try to jump into the deep end of the pool before you are ready, before you know the difference between story and storytelling, before you embrace being part of a collaborative community of writers and filmmakers and storytellers, before you understand the importance of format and grammar and how that impacts the filmmaking process, and before you start putting things in your screenplay because you think it works instead of because you think it's the best way to do it, and a whole host of other things that you gotta learn, if you're doing all those things, you're just broadcasting to everyone that you're a noob. So don't do that. Don't be that writer. Learn the craft the right way. Stop trying to jump the line without putting in the time and effort. I mean, yes, there are faster ways to success. There's some links below that can help you with those things. But ultimately, it's up to you. And of course, if you want to keep being a noob, that's fine. Just keep doing these things that I've mentioned so others will know that you're a noob. But if you want to improve as a screenwriter and move away from being a noob, you have to gain knowledge and experience along with skill at implementing the knowledge and experience you've learned along the way. And again, there are faster ways to move along this journey, but you can only do those once you realize where you're at on the screenwriting journey. Maybe you aren't even sure if you're still a beginning screenwriter or an intermediate screenwriter or where you're at. And if you need help figuring that out, you can watch this video right here. Please don't forget about 30 Minutes with Jake and when you tell a story, wherever you're at on the screenwriting journey. Tell a story that matters. See you later.